Welcome to Creative Cat Productions. I'm John Carl, and here's what's going down. Transmedia. That's the big buzzword Sega's using to describe their recent success with the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise. Did you know? Sonic the Hedgehog 3, with Keanu Reeves as Shadow the Hedgehog, was released in the US on December 20th, 2024. And it has gone on to exceed all expectations, taking in, so far, an estimated $420 million at the box office, making it the most successful Sonic the Hedgehog movie ever made. So far, because at the same time, Sonic 3 has garnered a lot of positive acclaim, effectively ensuring that Sega will go on making more and more of these movies into the future. In fact, just a few days ago, Sonic 4 was officially announced by Sega with a tentative release date of March 2027. What's it going to be about? No one really knows for sure, but a post-credits scene at the end of Sonic 3 reveals that it will involve Metal Sonic and Amy Rose, Sonic's mallet-wielding would-be girlfriend. Both of these characters are originally from Sonic CD, so perhaps the next movie is gonna be about time travel, and that's pretty cool. At the same time, Sega's announced exceptionally positive sales for their latest Sonic the Hedgehog video game. Sonic X Shadow Generations, which was released in November of 2024, has already surpassed 2 million copies sold since launch, an impressive pace for a game that's essentially a 13-year-old remaster with some additional bonus content. Granted, the bonus content is about Shadow the Hedgehog, a popular character prominently featured in the latest movie. And this, according to Sega, is the reason for all the success. They call it Transmedia, and Sega is investing a ton of talent and resources into making this concept the center of their business strategy. But what is Transmedia? Well, transmedia is actually a fairly baffling term that was coined by a USC professor named Henry Guy Jenkins III, and it's gotten some major circulation in academic literature and apparently business school. Essentially, transmedia vaguely refers to the attempt to tell a particular story across multiple types of media simultaneously. A famous example would be the original Star Wars trilogy and the so-called Star Wars Expanded Universe, which in its heyday involved a broad story about the conflict between the evil empire and the rebellion that was conveyed across a wide variety of media. Of course, you had the original movie trilogy, but there were also comic books, video games, novels, and even toys, which all in their own way contributed to the larger Star Wars narrative without completely contradicting what previously was established. People loved it, and it was a big part of being a Star Wars fan in the 1980s and 1990s. That is, until the Star Wars Expanded Universe was officially scrapped by Lucasfilm in 2014. But is this really what Sega had going in their favor when it comes to Sonic the Hedgehog in the winter of 2024? After all, Sonic 3 and Sonic X Shadow Generations have nothing to do with each other, outside of utilizing some of the same characters. The Sonic movies are a contemporary and wholly independent interpretation of the Sonic universe, doing very little to actually resemble the story or world from the video games. Another way of putting it is that neither the game or the movies reveal anything about the other, because they don't really exist within a shared narrative framework. And without a shared narrative framework, this really just isn't transmedia. No, there's another concept that I think better describes what's going on with the recent success of Sonic the Hedgehog, and that's good old-fashioned cross-promotion. Sega's raking it in because the popularity of the Sonic the Hedgehog movies has helped bolster the popularity of the Sonic the Hedgehog video games, and vice versa. By making Shadow the Hedgehog a mainstream character, played by Keanu Reeves, Sega has therefore enticed a new generation to want to play Sonic Generations, a game which now prominently features that same character. This brings more attention to the games, and therefore, hopefully, that same newfound fandom will translate over to more success for the next movie. And of course, all of this overexposure and brand familiarity is supposed to bolster the sale of endless merchandise for years to come. You will obey the Sega hive mind! Cross-promotion is a winning formula, and it's as old as massive mainstream children's entertainment itself. In fact, it's about as old as the Walt Disney Corporation, who as far as I can tell virtually created, or at least mastered, the art of self-cross-promotion years before anyone else. This is in fact one of the main reasons that Walt Disney created the original Disneyland. Not only was it a wonderful time for the whole family, but it was also a new way for the studio to promote their films and television shows. And simultaneously, the films became a way to promote the theme park. The more fans consumed one, the more they tended to want to consume the other, with the ultimate result of creating generations of Americans who were simply just eager to consume anything and everything Disney in general, like a giant gelatinous Mickey Mouse hive mind. And that's what Sega is trying to recreate now, their own hive mind. In fact, in February of 2024, in order to get this Transmedia thing really going, they hired a guy to be the head of Sega's new global Transmedia group, a former Disney executive by the name of Justin Scarpone. Justin Scarpone, in fact, is largely the guy that Sega's giving credit for their recent success, because it's supposedly Scarpone's strategic insights that led Sega to closely align the release of Sonic 3, the movie, with Sonic X Shadow Generations, the video game, in order to capitalize upon the hype of the moment. However, it seems premature to credit Scarpone or Sega's new Transmedia group, since Sega has in fact had the idea of releasing a bunch of movies based upon Sega IPs since roughly 2022. A bunch of different Sega movies or TV shows have been talked about for years, and some are almost certainly going to actually happen. And no doubt, each and every new movie that Sega co-produces over the next few years will be released alongside a video game and a slew of products. The Sega Hive Mind! But it remains to be seen whether or not this so-called transmedia strategy will actually pay off, or whether or not it even makes sense to hire a whole new executive with an entire multinational department beneath him, just to work out the obvious. That is, promote your IPs across various forms of media simultaneously. Like, this is what every entertainment company that gets big enough eventually does pretty much automatically. In fact, all of this perfectly describes what Nintendo's been plotting for the last decade or so, turning themselves into the next Walt Disney Corporation, with movies, theme parks, and now a fun interactive museum in Kyoto. But so far, while everything's based upon Nintendo's games, there's been pretty minimal effort to cross-promote anything. And this is because Nintendo, to their credit, is more focused on the specifics of their actual products. The one strategy that's always come back to save Nintendo whenever their demise was predicted in the past. The truth is, transmedia or cross-promotion doesn't always work. In fact, often this kind of brand overexposure can hasten the decline of a franchise if it's done sloppily. The same thing happened to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles back in the 1990s. At one point, the Ninja Turtles brand was like the biggest thing on the planet. But as the TV show started to worsen in quality and the movies became lamer and lamer, interest in the toys, comics, and even video games all began to rapidly evaporate. And soon, the kids of the 1980s and 1990s all moved on to greener pastures. Sure, the Ninja Turtles is still around, but it's never even come close to reclaiming the public attention that it once enjoyed nearly 40 years ago. The Ninja Turtles hive mind was sadly aborted. An over-reliance on such a strategy could risk distracting Sega from the only consideration that matters, and that's, of course, the quality of the actual games, and now movies, associated with their brand. You see, I have a crazy hypothesis, and that's that the really real reason Sega did so well with the Sonic brand in late 2024 is because audiences and critics both liked the new movie, and that Sonic X Shadow Generations was a well-made remake of one of Sega's most popular and well-known 3D Sonic games. I can guarantee that if one or both of these things actually sucked, that no one would be talking about the resurgence of Sega the way they've been doing lately. and certainly no one would be crediting some new obtuse strategy borrowed from academia. Sega doesn't need transmedia or cross-promotion. They just need to make sure that this new Shinobi movie being directed by Sam Hargrave actually turns out to be good, and it certainly wouldn't hurt to get some more Shinobi games out there as well. Will the Sega Hive Mind be able to compete with Nintendo's Hive Mind? One can only imagine. So what do you all think about Sega becoming a multimedia company? Do you like their movies? Let us know what you think and more in the comments. And thank you very, very much for watching Creative Cat Productions. Bye-bye now.